But let's begin at the beginning. What do you consider the most important fundamentals for bass players?
Well, as ridiculous as it may sound, one thing that is kind of my pet peeve for young bassists coming off and stuff is, believe it or not, the strap length. My strap is just one piece. It doesn't adjust. So you're always used to it being at the same spot on your body. Whether you like it high or low is your own personal preference, but as long as it's on the same spot, if you're practicing and then move, all your angles change, everything moves. So I like to try to encourage people to get that one spot that they're going to put the bass and leave it, and then work on everything from there. So it's just real important for me. I see a lot of players, reaming away in the dressing rooms, get up on stage, and the bass is in a completely different spot, and they can't do it, and they come back, blaming their roadie or their amp or whatever, It's usually, surprisingly enough, just to get your strap in the right spot is really important.
You've mentioned in the past having the fewest possible variables.
Yeah.
This is really an extension of that, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the first variable, really, where the bass is. Once it's in position on your body, and then worry about getting your arms close to it, and then you're down to your elbows and wrists, and then eventually to your fingertips. But it all bases off that one solid spot. And it sounds ridiculously stupid and elementary, but it's really important. A lot of people
maybe easily ignored, huh?
Yeah, probably why. A lot of fundamental things are easily ignored.
What about things like action and the feeling of the fingers on the strings? How should you adjust your action ideally for optimum performance?
Well, it's hard for a beginning player because they don't know what's right or wrong yet because they haven't had the experience of doing it. But I generally set my action to the point where it buzzes and then lift it up from there, down to where it buzzes and lift it up from there. If you can get a good repairman, he can hone your neck down and do a job on your frets. So you can get the action really low and have it not buzz at all. But I get it pretty low, and then again, as I said, raise it up so it's not flopping around and buzzing, because it's a happy medium. You can set up the bass for perfect studio tone where you get no buzz or rattle at all. Or for me, it's pretty ratty all the time because I'm more of a live player, of course, than a studio player. So mine is a little buzzy and rattling, but I personally prefer that because like Chris Squire's tone and Roundabout, it grind and grunge is great. That's you hear some character in there, some noise. To me, playing a rock and roll band is about as far from perfection as you could get. So a little noise actually adds to it, I think.
What about string spacing, the distance between the strings?
Well, it's pretty,
for action.
Usually they're not very adjustable, but I wish companies would stick with standards. There should be a basic Fender and a basic Gibson spacing, because that's the two basses that pretty much started out everything. So as a matter of fact, on this bass here, the Gibson spacing you can see is the strings are outside of its spacing. That's the standard Gibson spacing. Where the Fender spacing, where these DiMarzio pickups are made, they're right in on that. So it's a little off on here. But wider spaced strings give your fingers a chance to get in between if you're a finger player. It's real important.
Right. Now, what about string tension itself? How does that affect technique, the tension of the strings?
Well, however tight the strings are determines how much they're going to flap around and buzz on the fretboard. I would discourage anyone from using a real light set of strings because, bass is a real strength instrument. It takes a lot of strength to play it, more so than a guitar. And I prefer to encourage people to put as much into it to get as much out, use a real strength kind of point of view.
Could you tell us a little bit about your development in the early years as a player, what you got from your early influences?
Well, first major influence probably was the Yardbirds, Paul Samuel Smith. So. Great bass solos, great bass tone. I forgot the idea for the EVO style pickup. Super deep low end. I'm a man. Having a rave with the Yardbirds, totally great playing.
One of the early prototype heavy bands too.
Oh yeah, totally great. Real metal, if you wanted to call it that metal and mono. I guess you'd call it. But it was great. Him and then the Beatles and all the pop. British Invasion came through all the songs.
McCartney, melodic sense.
Yeah, McCartney's a way overlooked bass player, way underrated. All the Rain stuff, and it's great stuff. Really cool, great tones too. Really built the band. And a lot of what you see now in bass players for the whole song, it's just really, bass just wasn't like that back then. Motown, Jamie Jamerson, all over the place. A fundamental element of the song is a bass line.
Right.
Move the whole song. It made the whole song happen. So that's stuff I kind of grew up on, things that really were an important part of the song, bass parts that were part of the song, not soloing or not just thudding along, you know, eighth notes on the, you know, along with the single disco beat bass drum, you know. There's a lot more happening back then as far as, you know, writing goes. Then I got into Tim Bogart was probably my biggest real big bass influence. Tim Bogart from Vanilla Fudge.
He influenced you technically too.
Yeah, real technically. He's still my hero. He's the greatest. I got all my raking techniques from him. I think the bass he played on the first Vanilla Fudge record to this day is set the standard for the ability of a bass to move in the context of a song and just take it to places where it just wouldn't have gone without him. You know, it's really incredible. Jack Bruce, Cream, unbelievable. All the live stuff. I just did an interview with him together recently for a magazine cover and for a big article story about, you know, bass back then and now. And it's real interesting to hear his point of view on three-piece bands and stuff and how much the bass is really a part of things, you know.
Did you identify a lot with what he said?
Oh, absolutely. That? We were like right on the money, both kind of same thing. It was pretty cool. And he had a great voice and a great songwriter. Totally amazing. John Entwistle, Chris Squire, you know, you name them.
Did the sound of roto sounds come from Chris Squire?
Yeah, Chris Squire. Well, actually, I came more from John Entwistle, I think, for me. But when Chris Squire came out, he popularized it for everybody. That grinding bass tone, totally cool. He was a great player. But a guy in my neighborhood that started me playing bass, Joe Hesse, he actually gave me my first set of rotos. So it was a used set off his bass, and once I tried him, like back in 1971, I think it was, once I put him on, I couldn't try anything else again, you know, so that was how long I've been playing him. So that's kind of where that tone came from. But and other than that, you know, Jocko, and then everything, you know, Oscar Peterson piano, I used to listen to a lot, Sonny Rollins, jazz sax player, Herbie Mann.
Yeah. Frank Zappa.
Frank Zappa heavily, all my 7/4 and 5/4. I learned in odd time signatures, and he was the king of that, you know, so I learned a lot. I can, you know, from memory, sing you, you know, his whole first 10 records, you know. Me and Steve Vai on the tour bus on the first Dave tour, we could sing every Frank Zappa song there was with every little nuance. It was funny. So we learned a lot of that. And yeah, it's about everything. Anything in music is an influence.
Including things like Bach even, right?
Yeah, well, Bach I got into real heavily very, very early on, way early 70s, and everybody's like, it's a buzzword now, I listen to classical music, and you know, I'd much rather go listen to something that no one else is listening to, you know, like pedal steel guitar or ethnic music, something that not everybody's into, because I've always, as a player, I've always tried to go towards something different than what everyone else is doing, and it's been successful for me so far, so I'm going to continue that. Instead of going with how everyone else is being influenced, go somewhere else, you know. Get a new bass like the Yamaha, I have to mimic all the wear on the new bass. So on this here, remember I was talking about the position for your thumb?
Yes.
That's natural wear into the pickguard. It's a multi-layered Fender pickguard, so that's all natural wear. If you can see, there's wear spots here, all along here. It's all wear from where my thumb goes all along, you know. So I've like worn this thing into, you know, worn it out practically, you know. So it's, and I get used to an instrument. It's a good idea for players when you're starting out to pick an instrument and stick with it, because you'll find your body starts to shape. Now, right now, if I stand up, my ribs go in on this side from this bass being up against me. My shoulder goes down on the left from holding it, so my body's permanently crippled from holding on to a 30 pounds of Fender bass for so long, whatever. But so you really fit into it. It becomes such a natural part of you after a while. So to change basses, get a new bass is very tough to do. So anything I do to the instrument, I try to mimic on my new instruments what happened naturally to my Fender after years and years and years of playing. So I knew that was going to happen. And so now on this bass, basically, I've used this for all the recording I've done recently, and I've used it a little bit live. But it's so hard to get used to anything different than the Fender. Right. So what I've done with this bass to get it more closer to what I like, I've actually worn down here with a little moto tool. I faked the actual wear there, so it feels the same. And basically I had to take like 600 grit sandpaper and just take all the shine off, because if it's too shiny, it's too slippery.
Right.
But that bass is like bare wood, so it just sticks on my body. I've had to like put this tape and stuff on there to make it
traction.
Yeah, give it to like the stuff you put on your bathtub so you don't slip and things like that, And just wear it down and make it feel worn in.
You scalp the fretboard and things like that too, don't you?
Yeah, I started to scalp this one, but I was on my way to Japan under the auspices of Yamaha, and I didn't want to beat their beautiful bass. They were kind enough to give me too bad, so I ended up not doing my homespun scalloping job that I did annihilate my Fender with. So that's I will do it though. The purpose of that is when you do that high bend,
you get a little more bend.
You get a little of that wood out of the way there, and it tends to, when your hands are hot and sweaty or whatever, you tend to catch up on that wood a little bit. So that's what that's for. But basically, I just wear the thing down.
What about your detuner?
This Hipshot detuner, great little deal. For years, I used to tune down the low D live, and I'd have to tune in between while the singer's trying to say something, or something, and in dead air there while people are streaming out of the bar, But I saw an ad for this in one of the guitar magazines, and it's like, fell from the heavens. Perfect, exactly what I needed. So it's a real simple device. It just takes your tuning key and mounts it on a little thing that you flip it. It just moves the whole thing down, so you don't change the tuning at all. Stays right in. Drop it down to low D, back to an E. Works, perfect right in tune. Back up to the E. So it works great. If you got to make sure and pull the string really super tightly. I just want to put my strings on. Tune. I see guys playing a lot and bending strings, and halfway through the night the bass is hopelessly out of tune. So I always keep it torqued as heavy as I can. When I put a new set of strings on, I tune them up extra sharp, let them sit for a while, then tune them back down and squeeze them and pull them as hard as possible before they break. To make sure they're all worked in good. So when I go up on stage and play it, I almost never have a tuning problem. I almost never break a string. I haven't broken a string for probably about.
This is a special set of strings for you too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we can actually make some kind of Billy Sheehan deal set or something. I don't know, but this is my suggestion, and they seem excited about it. So I think we can actually package it up. It's basically a standard set of rotosound strings, but the G is a little bit lighter and the E is a little bit heavier. It evens the tension out. It gives you a nice big, fatter, heavier low end, which all bass players could probably use. And if you tune down to a low D, because the E string is a little bit heavier, the tension stays there. It doesn't flop around.
What about your pickups and actual electronics in the guitar?
All passive. I don't use any DiMarzio pickups. I've used DiMarzios for years. It's just loud, good sounding, fat, honking pickup. Straight to a volume control out. My bass has two outputs, as you see. One is for the DiMarzio output, and the other one is for the, I use either a DiMarzio Model 1 or an old Gibson EBO humbucker, big, fat, super low-end bass. So I run 2 amps, one clean, or one super deep low-end and one high-end, so I can mix between high and low on the bass. That's making an awfully long story short, but it's, trust me on it. Basically, remember the old Rickenbacker bass that had a stereo jack, Ricco sound? Yeah, that's the same principle. But back in, I think it was 1971, I actually put my first humbucker on there, so it's been around for a long time. So it actually works out because the humbucker, low-end pickup is the best super deep low-end, and the Fender style, DiMarzio here in this case, is covers everything else. You have the best of both worlds on that.
And you also have a nice place to rest your thumb.
Yeah, it's good thumb rest thing. Oh, it's good point.
What words of wisdom could you give to aspiring bass players who want to be known as bass players for the 90s? What could you tell them?
Find a live, real human being drummer and sit down and work with them and work out songs. And I know it's tough these days to play out clubs because there aren't as many clubs as there were when I was coming up. But if you play live everywhere and anywhere, I played bank openings, football practices for the Buffalo Bills. Never any grocery stores, fortunately. Fashion shows, millions of proms. You know, proms, you had like 2 slow songs. When you got those, the rest of the night, everybody's like sweating, throwing their tuxedos aside, you know, going nuts. So we played everything, you know. It was a great experience to learn it. Now when I get out on stage, it's a big stage, there's millions of lights. You know, if something goes wrong, anything happens, I've been there. I've done it a million times, you know. So it's much easier to handle. And to see young players be able to get that kind of experience.
Any suggestions for how they could do that? Just lock in with a live band?
Yeah, live band. And you have to
practice a lot live?
Yeah. Well, I learned most everything I do live, on stage in front of people. I didn't really sit home and figure it out. It all came like from a bolt from the blue. I learned about modes on stage. I was in Pittsburgh playing at this club called Stage One years ago, and a friend of mine had taught me about the modes, but I didn't understand I didn't get the deal. What does he mean by modes and this position? All of a sudden, and all of a sudden the fretboard just exploded like the significance of it. You know, it looked like this big. It's, now I see. You know, right there, right live on the, you know, in front of people, I actually figured out, you know, finally a little bit about music.
Initially, as a bass player, though, if they were just to get with a drummer and work with a drummer, would that be a good enough start?
That's totally where it's at. And listen, cop things off records. Listen to great bass players now. I mean, guys from AC/DC or Judas Priest, maybe unsung heroes, but those guys lay down great, all the funk stuff, great, amazing. I mean, that's the groove, the rhythm and feel and groove to get, you know. Cop that. But so much stuff nowadays is a little bit stiff. That's why I would recommend sitting down with a drummer, you know, a real live guy.
Your right-hand technique is really well developed. What can you tell us about your right-hand plucking approach?
Well, that's the most important thing for fingerstyle bass players, your right-hand technique. And the most overlooked aspect of it is having a great spot to anchor your thumb, a great and permanent, well-known spot to have your thumb at all times. So
Home base, huh?
Yes, exactly. All puns intended. And what I do, many years, I started off in the Fender bass, which is the basic Fender precision bass pickup position here, these dual split little guys. And I always have my thumb right in here, which dampens now I have it touching the bass and then up against the pickup itself, and then also up against the E string, which dampens the E string. So if you're you're your E isn't going to be humming along while you're doing anything.
That cleans up the sound too a bit.
Oh yeah. And when you're playing really loud and everything's feeding back, you got to hang on every string for dear life so it doesn't get out of control. And the other place I put my thumb is right on the next pickup here, which dampens the A string. So when you're nothing else is sounding. Actually, the other part of my thumb is dampening the E string too, so I got them both down. And occasionally I'll even get up to there and put my thumb on the pickup itself, or just the G string playing. But the important point is to have a spot for your thumb, whether it be one spot or several spots. I'm just used to that from traveling around over the years. Whenever I do anything, I always have my thumb anchored on the bass. Any like hammer-on stuff on the... Always anchored here. It's actually starting to wear the paint down on this bass here. Always have a solid point from which to work. And I keep my wrist locked real solidly. Some instructor was telling some kids the other day to always leave your wrists loose and floating over the instrument. The problem with that is when you're on a 60-foot stage running full blast in front of 20,000 people, the monitors are feeding back, people are throwing stuff. You're going to try to play delicately floating. It ain't going to happen. You know, it's not going to work. You're going to fall on your face, basically. So I really need to lock my arm down on the bass, my thumb in the spot, my wrist locked, and my fingers work. The difference between some players that I see work from this knuckle, where I work from that knuckle there. And the reason for that, you'll see some movement in there, but that's more for positioning. The reason for that is when your fingers sweeps like that, it creates a radius about that size.
I see.
And when you sweeps like that, the radius is much smaller. And therefore, that smaller radius fits in between the strings better, so you can actually play one string without hitting every other string while making a sweep. Some players play like that. Stand-up players play like that. They also know stand-up players have a spot for the thumb. It's on the side of the neck.
Yes.
And that's how they play it. Watch the guy the other night playing stand-up bass. He has his thumb locked down there real solidly, and he's got his spot. And on a stand-up bass, there's not too much difference in how any of them are built. It's the bridge thing and the neck and the fingerboard extension over the body, and they're all like that. The problem with electric bass is many manufacturers, everybody makes one different.
Different configurations.
Yeah, so you never got a good spot for your thumb. That's why I make all my basses with this, make sure they got the old Fender-style pickups on them, or I can't really ever play them live. You know, even if it's a real cool custom bass, I have to make and put these pickups in it in order for me to play. So in other words, getting back to where we started from, wrist lock, thumb in a good spot, work from this angle, basically, is how I pluck. And there's even a little bit of technology to how the finger goes over the string. As you tighten this joint, your plucking will become harder because you're digging into it harder. Right. Or you can leave it loose and let it float over, like for raking techniques. Like see, when you're raking across, these are sliding across. This joint here is actually pretty loose, and it's just kind of like working its way across. Now, if you want to play harder, you tighten that joint up. So that's like your tension control.
Right. Dynamics control.
Yeah. Dynamic tension even. Hey, why not do both, you know? But yeah, that's kind of the workings of the joint, how I use it. Now I do a finger exercise sometimes just to make sure I'm really using that part of the joint, which is just try and hold your hand completely still, your fingers completely still, and just work from that joint up one finger at a time without the other ones moving. And it's great at parties too if you want to do drinking bets and to see people. No one can ever do it really. Well, it's actually pretty easy, but then you do twos and different groups of them and whatever. But it's just a good way to exercise your hand, keeping stiff from here to here, totally stiff, and then just working from those joints there. Now you'll see me when I'm playing. Of course, I violate those rules all over the place, but that's basically what it comes from. You know, is using that joint like that for 3 fingers.
Exactly. Now, your main approach is a three-finger approach.
Right.
Could you describe some of those details for us?
Well, since most Western music is in 4, to get 4 out of 3, you have to, when you're plucking, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, if you're going to do 4, 1 lands on a different finger each time. Now, there's a little controversy on which way to go when you're plucking. Should you go this way? Some guys want to go back and forth. But if you're sitting at the dentist office and you're nervous, your natural hands are going to fall in that direction. It seems to be that that's the natural way that your fingers move. So therefore, that's the natural
law of physics, almost.
Yeah, kind of the law of hand physics, anyway. You know, whatever book that was in. But that's kind of why I eventually got to that direction. To go in the other direction, sometimes I will for exercise. Anytime I do anything, I'll always exercise it backwards, forward, sideways, do it every conceivable way, even in ways that I normally wouldn't do it, just to exercise my muscles around so I'm not stuck in one particular pattern. So, I'm going in this direction. The reason I'm not going back and forth like that is because the middle finger then works twice as much. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It works twice as much on each passage back and forth. Again, that is a good exercise to do. Now, I start always, incidentally, with my ring finger. Some guys, I guess if you're going the other way, you would start with your index finger.
Would that be considered your heaviest attack finger?
Yeah. You know, I guess I would consider it that way. But so when I start with that finger, that's 1. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the next finger, the middle finger, begins 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that ends you up perfectly for your index finger to take the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's. So when you're getting real fast and stuff, you will hear 3 in there if you listen closely. But when I get my live calluses and stuff back, you probably won't. You know, it would be so loud you can't tell anyway. But that's kind of the trick of playing fast with 3. Now you can do with a lot of 2-finger techniques out there. Jeff Berlin plays 2-finger technique, unbelievable. I mean, the last thing he needs is another finger. You know, so but. With a 3, for me, it tends to be easier. You know, Iron Maiden, that galloping kind of thing for heavy metal style stuff. It works good for that, you know, because that's all. Of the 2, or of the 5 here, left a few out. And that's one thing I left out also. When you work from that joint, you even up the flatness. See, when you have your fingers like this finger sticks way out. As soon as you change them, you get a totally flat surface there, and it makes it easier so that one doesn't stick out over the other.
Right.
So it's funny because of all this stuff, you'd think, you know, I've spent years figuring this out and then did it, but in actual fact, I did it for years without having a clue as to what it was. So it all kind of developed totally natural by what felt natural to me to play, what actually felt right. So, yeah, that's about it for the right hand, I think. Oh, sometimes I use 4 fingers, but that little finger never gets a quite good enough callus on it, so it catches. So you'll hear it in there.
What about raking strings technique?
Yeah, that's another right-handed technique, and what that consists of basically of when you rake fingers across, similar to a garden rake, which is probably where they got the name from.
Exactly.
Actually, I didn't know what it was called until Tim Bogart, who I stole the idea from in my early days. Tim, well, I am as well now. He's my total hero on bass, and he did tons of raking techniques. And when I first started bass and listened to him, I realized that I had to be a finger player because there's no way you could do those with a pick. Those sweeping techniques are popular now, and they're very close to it, but there's still a lot of things you can do raking that you can't do with a pick. So I stole it from Tim Bogart, so I had to give him credit for that. But it's basically a way and they kind of catch at different times. So you get that. Now that particular move there, that's a 4-finger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So you can really get some wailing, a whole bunch of flailing notes coming out of there like that.
This seems like a good way to build right-hand speed.
Yeah, well, the speediest things I do are probably the raking stuff, because there's just so many notes whip by. If I ever had to go back and transcribe, I forgot what it was, I'm doomed, because I didn't even know what half the notes had to sneak by there. But that's definitely one of the secrets of getting a lot of speed out of the instrument, if that's your goal, to be a speedy player. But it also adds a fluidity to your speed, because things are flowing and raking and being pulled across in the same direction and stuff like that. And it makes speed for speed's sake is pointless, but if it's fluid and musical,
exactly, in context,
which is where raking kind of comes in. It makes it a little bit more musical, more rhythmic. Stuff like that.
Would you say between the 3-finger technique, the raking, and then the 4-finger, you have your basic favorite right-hand patterns?
Yeah.
That you use 90% of the time?
Pretty much, yeah. The only other thing I do is the tapping stuff, which, that's another story. But yeah, that's basically it. The most important thing for anybody, I think, is that thumb locked, strap, length, all those little crazy things that you would never think of.
All the little variables.
Yeah, locked in there, good spot, hands in the right position, playing with a lot of strength to get a really good, strong, hard, solid callus, because that'll have a lot to do with the tone of your playing. So however hard your fingertip is how easy it slips over the strings. I always have used rotosound strings, and they're very rough strings. They're tough on the frets, but for tone, I can't play anything else really. And they grab your finger real well. So there's a real catch to it. So there's a percussive attack at the note. Now, pick bass players got an advantage because they can get their attack from that pick sound.
Exactly.
Where finger players, you got to get a big, hard, solid callus to kind of mimic that, and give you that attack. Producers will drive you crazy and ask you to play with a pick if you don't have it. So warn you in advance. Make sure you get that callus up there and save yourself some trouble later.
What can you tell us about recovery muscles?
Most of your moves you do on bass have to do with pulling your hands in towards your thumbs, towards the thumb on the back of the neck. You're pushing down on the strings to push them up against the frets, or you're plucking up towards your thumb when you're plucking from the right hand. So it's all that pull muscle. You almost never see anyone working on the muscle to get your finger back into the position where it can pull again. And that's the whole idea of exercising recovery muscles. In other words, it's not the muscle that you use to pull in. It's the muscle you use to push out. So it's some kind of rubber band thing somebody sent me one time that you can exercise your hands with. But you'll find if you push up against, try to lift your finger up and oppose against it like that.
Yes.
And each finger you'll find is very, very weak, where down, of course, is very strong. So if you exercise that muscle, you'll find that 50% of your moves is recovery to get to the next move. So when you press down on a note, you got to lift up to get to the next note. When it comes to doing something fast, you're going to have to get up and down fast. So you're going to find that by exercising your recovery muscle, as crazy as it might seem, it actually helps a lot in your speed and accuracy and the fluidity of your hands. This is just a thing that came out of nowhere one time, and I started working on my recovery muscles, and I found that every time I did, my playing took a leap into a little bit more exactness and a little less slop that I normally have a lot of. So, but yeah, the recovery muscles is kind of people always, that's one of the things. I think it's peaked and it's reached total overkill to the point where it's technique for technique's sake, which is a total waste and a total, it's a horrible situation for music to be in, because I come from a song era, song playing, Three Dog Night, Young Rascals, all these bands that had great songs, and that's the stuff I always played in a band that had a lot of vocals in my early days. And so songwriting to me is really essential. So now a lot of songs are built around just technique. Well, let's find a song where we can fit all this in because we want everybody to hear this technique. It's just like, the new band I have, Mr. Big, we're writing things exactly the opposite. We're writing a song, getting a piece of music down that's really, where we think it's at, and then adding playing to it, because that's how my playing evolved. We go up and play, Three Dog Night songs, Joy to the World, in the early days of bar band copy tunes. And, we'd be flying all over the place in them, and having fun with it. Because once you got a good song, a good foundation, then you take off. It's gone the opposite nowadays. I just think a lot of people have kind of lost touch with that. Because everybody's wowed by the hot kid on the block. Yeah. And that's real cool. But, it really doesn't have the dimension and the staying power that a song does. A song is everything.
Do you feel also that as a musician it's important to have a lot of song repertoire in your background?
Oh, yeah.
To create and to improvise better and feel comfortable?
Everybody, when I was playing in a bar band for so many years, we used to get these elitists that talk about playing original material. You got to be original. Well, we were always a copy band. But as it turns out, that was like, the Beatles. Yeah. There was an original bone in their bodies, when they first, started. They were playing all the Servicemen's Club in Germany, and even their first record was a bunch of copy tunes on it. Please, Mr. Postman, Twist and Shout, all that stuff.
Roll Over Beethoven.
Yeah, and that's where you really get your chops. Just like you learn other people's solos, by learning other people's songs and playing and performing and getting an audience to react to them. That's where you learn. The basis. Everybody talks so much about technique and all these things. Why are we doing it? Are we doing it to solo for the rest of our lives? We're doing it to get up in front of people and perform and make something happen with an audience, or have a record that touches many people. And you're not going to do that necessarily with lots of soloing. You do that with a song. And the whole purpose of being in music for me is to get up on stage and entertain people. It's not necessarily just sit there and solo all night long. That's crazy. So many people get into that too much now. And it's just, I think if people just kind of focused on their real goal in music, which should be to be up in front of people performing, doing something that's going to touch a lot of people and have a common ground between you and a lot of other people, I think then you get back to songwriting, So
communication.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the old days of playing in bars, we had to make our living by getting people in the bar, staying all night, buying drinks, picking up girls, whatever they did, but they had to get there and stay there. And the only way we did that was by playing the best songs we could find from every band, doing the best way possible. And that was like the best training ground ever. It has a lot to do with my playing, my techniques, my whole point of view. Because as I said, the foundation of it is not soloing technique, And unfortunately, it's bad that guitar has gone that way. But it'll be even worse if more bass players do that. I feel in a lot of ways they've created some monsters out there, and that a lot of guys, the first thing they pick up the bass, they start doing hammer-ons. That's great. That's really neat. But if out of 500 bands that you could conceivably get in, maybe 10 of them you'll be able to take a solo in.
What about the groove?
That's where it's at. I mean, that's, I learned about playing drums. I used to, in the old bands, used to rehearse with just the drummer alone. I used to learn all our songs and just going just bass and drums. Just, no guitar, no vocals, just learning grooves, learn how to work with drums, pound along with them, stay in time. And we always had to get audiences dancing in the early days, so we always had to make it move. We always had to make it groove and slide, and we were always really successful. Talas back in Buffalo, like we held every attendance record at every club. They stopped counting after a while. It was like for over a decade, or from 72 to 80. 5. I mean, Talas was around in Buffalo, so we certainly cut our teeth on that. A principle that I use with my left hand that I began or noticed first on my right hand is that principle of locking things together. My hand, once it's, I actually use kind of my index finger as like a bar and work everything off of that. Like it's always clamped on there. My finger always has like 2 calluses, one for like it covers 2 strings, sometimes 3 strings. Lock my hand on so that as it falls onto the bass, automatically you cover 4 frets with 4 fingers like that. So that's your standard position, always locked in there. Sometimes my thumb is on top, sometimes behind. I'm never sure which is really right or not.
Pursuing that, would it be pretty useful to use a chromatic scale to develop your left hand?
Yeah. What's a chromatic scale? No.
4 notes in a row.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that I do as an exercise. You can do that backwards, forwards. Start it from the middle, out. And also I do exercising without my right hand sometimes, because you'll find if occasionally you do an exercise with just one hand independently, right hand alone or left hand alone, if you watch your playing, sometimes you'll notice that your left hand will cover for your right and vice versa.
Like focus maybe more as you separate them too.
Yeah, I focus on who's doing what, whereas they cover for each other's mistakes kind of. If your left hand is weak in an area, your right hand will kind of beef up the move there to make up for it. So what I try to do sometimes, not all the time because you'll lose your coordination between hands, but work on my left hand alone just to make sure I see what it's doing. You can feel the weak spots in it, especially when you do exercises like that are across, playing all those notes. I feel, this is definitely the weaker fingers, and I definitely feel that. So I'll work on that across the neck, like that. And again, I play mostly in patterns, so this is the pattern, all 4 fingers across all 4 strings on 4 frets. Now you notice that when you're actually playing music, you're going to have to get up to stretch like that.
Of course.
You probably actually wouldn't, in most music, you'd never stretch more than that, really, than 4, than however many frets that is, 5 frets or whatever it is. So that's where it comes into play, how I actually musically what I play. I've concentrated mostly, as we've been talking about what to play, because it's pretty much my philosophy. I'd really not show people notes, show them the notes that, and scales. You can get that out of any book. Bach wrote it all down 200 years ago, so there's really no point in me going over what scales, because I really don't know them anyway. But what I concentrate in mostly is just my hands and how they work, so that's kind of what the purpose of all this is. And the thing I do for my right hand is I basically do, in all my musical playing, there's only 3 patterns. I'm a pattern player, and there's only 3 patterns. The first pattern is 2 whole step. Whole step, whole step. Really go with those music words again there. Diatonic meaning
just the normal 7-note scale, like a major scale,
yeah,
generating all the modes that go with it.
I'm not even kidding. I really don't know what that means, but I know I'll probably play some diatonic stuff.
Absolutely.
Here. I know. But what basically we're doing, here's the two patterns. I'll show how it works. Here's the two patterns. There's one of them.
Right.
There's the other one. Now, whenever I do a scale, like a C major or G major scale, actually it only goes...
Right, before you hit the octave.
Right, but I'll extend it across all notes that I can play of that scale in that position. So that would include that F sharp. So that's all the notes of the G major scale in that position. Exactly. So then you move up to that. That's the other pattern of the two whole steps. It's all of that one. Did I do anything diatonic yet?
They're all diatonic. You're on safe ground. And that's back to an octave higher.
Exactly. So if you notice, if you want to, whoever's watching this puts their tape in reverse, whatever, only 3 patterns were included in all of those.
Right.
Various groupings of those patterns, but they're all 2 whole steps and a half step and a whole step. That's all there is. And it's funny that of all the music, all Western music, which is in basically a major scale, or even the minor key, which is a relative minor, I know about that a little bit, it's only those 3 patterns. So you get into like harmonic minors and then other
the odd intervals in it.
Odd scales that that odd people probably think of. So.
What about your rocking on the bar technique that you use with your left hand?
Rocking on the bar thing. I used to do that when I was in an old band. We played in the bars, and we'd always get out on the bar. And no, just kidding. Rocking on the bar technique. That sounds like something a band would do in a bar. But what we're actually referring to there is it's kind of a barring technique. So you actually play with this part of your finger. So you cover, the string is on the tip, and then this middle part. So you've got to get us a little snap of that joint. So that little hula dance kind of thing there.
It's like a hinge almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or a collapsing kind of effect.
Yeah, so... it's real handy to just get more notes. So again, economy of motion, so you're not moving and using fingers more than you have to, and you're getting the most out of the smallest amount of movement. And so, to use it. There's millions of notes coming out there, but it's like, there's hardly any movement. Actually, I want to do it. Barring technique. And after a while, you get calluses right there.
I'll bet.
Which is different than the callus there. So
again, this involves some recovery muscles, doesn't it?
It's a different muscle because it involves a muscle that makes your finger push down and then all of a sudden snap.
Right.
Get this little snapping thing. Some people's fingers just don't do it. Some people's fingers, I guess maybe they do if they work on it long enough. But I've seen some people have a real hard time with it. But it's if you can do it, it's a real cool way to. If you really get good at it, you can get that snappy. You can actually hammer down with it without actually playing the note. You really get that snap wailing down on that thing. So it's a real handy thing, and it really helps me out a lot of my playing. I use it a lot, just to make up for lack of a finger being there. It's real handy.
I understand recently you went to Japan as a soloist. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I went over there on the auspices of Yamaha, and they did, matter of fact, the TV commercial, that I did with Yamaha. They ran that before the show and everything like that. I did a couple of neat, like the double tap thing. I used a lot in the commercial.
Now let's turn it up.
Yamaha has been a great help to me in a lot of aspects of my career. And they sent me over to do some bass clinics, and it was really funny because, they do a lot of like jazz guys clinics, but don't do too many rock. Out there alone, no drums, no guitar, no vocals, no nothing, just go out and play bass. It was a really cool experience. Japanese people were so incredibly great to me. It's really like being on a different planet there with different language and everything was different.
So you have extra strength, so you can play bass with big fat strings. So you need the two. It's not like this. It's like this.
今ビリーがやってたようにこのように指を、することによって、一本の指で弾くよりは力が入って、ベースの弦を、弾くことができるということです。
どうもありがとう。
I think the interesting thing about Japanese audiences is they really appreciate that soul blues influence on music, and Japanese audiences also can like many kinds of music. Not like in America, it's just I like only metal, or I will listen only to dance, or I will not listen to anything else but, it's like they listen to everything. Go to a Whitney Houston show, then to a Metallica show, so it is possible to do. I mean, myself, I like a lot of different acts, so it's really interesting to see that. I wish they do that in America, Well, all my techniques are double-handed because I got to use both hands.
I mean the tap-on
Okay,
style.
I know what you mean. All right.
Trick question.
Yeah, right. Well, that actually developed a long time ago when I saw Billy Gibbons with ZZ Top. When he did that, I thought, oh, great, you can... For, I don't know, in one of their ZZ Top songs we used to do in the old bar band. So that's where it kind of came from. And then I realized that after that you can hit that note and you can even get more off it like that. And initially it was meant to just kind of enhance what the whole band was doing. It eventually turned into kind of a solo thing.
And you use two fingers, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. That's the one thing that makes it different from a lot of guitar players. I see a lot of guitar players, as soon as they do this tapping thing, and bass players, because they do this like real lightweight, single finger little thing where they flip the note off. Now here's already the huge disadvantage. First of all, your arm isn't anchored anywhere.
Right.
So if you're running across a 60-foot stage, like I said before, or even in a bar and people are throwing beer on you, stuff like that, you're never gonna find out where you are, and your hand isn't gonna be. You're not going to really know where you are if you've got nothing to really lock to. You're not going to know where your hand is. So I do the old thumb, again, locked on somewhere, like on the edge of the neck, usually is a good spot. And also another thing I do, instead of just lightly doing it with one finger the wrong way, which is down like that, that's just not a normal way for your hand to move. So clamp this finger down on top of it, because on bass, as I said before, it's a real strength instrument, and you really need a lot of strength to put as much into it as possible, so as much comes off of your instrument. You don't have to depend on your amp and all this electronic stuff to make your sound come out. You got to make things read loudly off the instrument itself alone. Even yes, exactly. So the double finger really gives you a chance to knock it right off the neck if you want. Really gives you a chance to really hit down really hard. It gives you way more strength. I mean, if you try it against your hand, it's way more strength down like that. You're going to really need that strength to make it sound loud. So it doesn't slow you up at all.
Now, when you do phrases like that, are you crossing fingers?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I'll get this finger behind. See, because it's all you're doing when you're tapping, for anybody that doesn't know about it, is, you know, when you're playing a line, you've got like these notes that you're playing. Well, you just move this finger in and play those notes for these fingers. So you're like, you can actually do a double on one finger, a trill like that. I used to drive keyboard players crazy because they couldn't figure out how I was doing that in the early days. So you're hitting down, pulling off, hit down, pull off, down, off, down, off.
That's an interesting technique.
Then you can move it too. And then move out of the... See how the thumb is always right there?
Right, an anchor point.
That way I'll always know that I'm going to hit right on that G and I get that real strengthening. Because I've just, again, I've seen so many guys go out on stage with this incredible technique. You can't hear it. You can't. It doesn't read because there's no strength behind it. Always, you know, everybody spends too much time practicing. Like a...
Oh, wait, I saw you reaching down there. Now, what exactly was that all about?
Well, let me think now. Oh, okay, so if I was going to get... I need that note there. It's just an idea of how...
Hands crossing over.
Yeah, it's an idea of how things kind of get invented, you know, indiscriminately. They just come up. Mm-hmm. Instead of now, my arm is tucked into my body, and I'm doing this position. Now, if I need that note down there, this hand is free. It's not doing anything. Right. Now, do I change my whole arm position to stretch down and get that? Or can I keep it in the same place and use that? Yeah. Way easier move.
More efficient, isn't it?
And it looks better, too. So here you go over here. I mean, people are like, whoa, what the hell was that? But actually, it's way easier to do. Sometimes some things are good because they make it look harder than it actually is, but sometimes they're actually useful. Like over-the-neck things. When I first did that, when I first went over the neck, I found that it was easier for me to get those two harmonics there than like this, because your hands curve this way. When you put them over the neck, they flatten out. So you want that flat for those harmonics like that. So it always tended to flatten out and be a little easier to do, even though everybody thought it was total showboat. It actually had a purpose there to be used. So again, so when you go behind like that, sometimes there is a use for it. And there's all kinds of ways you can do hammer-ons as long as you understand what notes you're going for. The basics of it are to get that real strong, solid blast on that. So if you can do that, then your choice of notes is totally up to you, whatever you end up wanting to do. It's kind of a double. What's happening
there? So we're dealing adjacent strings?
Yeah, we're dealing with a couple techniques in a row there. So what's happening when I pull off this string with this finger, because there's so much strength behind it, with that other finger on there, it hits the string underneath it and actually plays that note. So you actually
almost like a rake?
Yeah, it is actually a rake, and it ends up as kind of half rake, half hammer-on. So you're going to have to coin a word here. What do a raker-on or a ham-ache or whatever, or a ham-hock maybe. So you get this like flurry of notes.
Sounds like almost like flamenco guitar.
Or flamingo guitar. Then you have to do that on one leg though. So you get like, that's just kind of an inadvertent technique that comes from applying a lot of strength to your hands. And once you just, my whole purpose in a lot of my exercises and moves is just to create a machine out of my hands so they do, you know, what they have to do on their own. And I can just kind of direct them from another spot in my mind, you know, so I don't have to really think about what I'm playing. Once all the exercises I show with the left hand and all the right hand stuff, once you build up your hands to a good machine, you can stop thinking about it, because when you think, when you're playing, as you probably well know, you're lost.
So you're talking about learning your left-hand patterns, your right-hand patterns, and finally putting it all together to the point where you don't have to think about it.
Yeah. As I said, when I found out all the things I was doing, it was only after I had actually done them for a long time that I actually sat down and figured out, oh, my finger's on the other side there. No wonder. Because naturally, when I'm playing live and the band is real loud, you can't hear anything, and I'm pressing off hard, the natural thing you want to do is press harder. So out of nowhere, this finger just came around and started doing it like that.
The help of its assistance of the
next door neighbor, you might as well help him out, you know. So, you know, it kind of naturally occurs like that, and it's kind of a natural evolution of thing. And so then, again, a lot of this stuff began, I played in a three-piece band for almost my whole life, and so we always had to cover for other players. So I would, the hammering things, like in Schizoid Man, we used to play by King Crimson, that one. There's a soprano sax trill right in the middle of like that. So I had to get
filling
that
in the
there.
missing part.
Yeah, so I always had to fill in the extra guitarist or keyboard player. So that's where things like, always at a double octave.
Yes.
Basically.
That almost sounds like a pianistic technique.
Yeah, it's kind of a, well, if you locked your...
Or a drum pattern.
Yeah, it's drum patterns, whatever you might want it to be. Well, it's basically just drum rudiments tapped on. Have you ever see a piano player when they do like octaves? Sure. They kind of lock their hand in that little octave thing so that their fingers will always hit. And so I kind of do the same thing. Again, trying to, kind of looks kind of Star Trek-ish, I know, but lock my fingers together like that, so it's an octave.
Right.
And then this hand, the same thing down here. It's not the same position for me personally, just because that finger doesn't fit there as well. But I try to double up on this finger to get that low note to sound really well, and I just hit like if you're just riding along on an A.
Just right at groove.
A little more interesting way of doing it, rather than
more colorful, more energetic.
Yeah, and they can move it around to it. And any drum rudiment you end up doing. And then from that, I got into fifths, where we can actually tap fifths too, where you do. Individually tap, and you can also individually tap the octaves too, and any kind of rhythmic pattern you can think of, and then you can get into all kinds of.
Now, in that case, what's going on?
Actually, it's just a E minor chord. So I take these two with that, and take these two outside ones.
Aha! Break up the chord.
Exactly. Now. So anything you can imagine chord-wise. Yeah, anything you can imagine chord-wise, just in your mind, split it up. And it's easy to experiment with. But again, rather than show you what notes to play, or try and have people, I mean, who wants to play the stuff I'm playing anyway? But rather than try and show you what notes to play, I'd much rather be able to show people how it is that that's gotten, and let people use their own imagination to come up with their own moves and stuff. So if you understand the idea of that strength, the rhythmic thing, the attack, be able to hit down on the strings to get a good, good solid, keeping it on the neck at all times, of course. So anything you can imagine you can do in there. So once you get the actual hand technique down, because so many people try and show people what what notes to play, but I think if you really know the technique, you can come up with your own notes, probably be a little hipper,
And basically, that's what we've been covering is techniques, and hopefully that they'll lead to the creation of a new style, as they did in you with somebody else, using the same foundation type techniques.
For someone to take whatever they want from me, and hopefully they'll come up with something better and expand on a thing. Because every time like I said, I saw Billy Gibbons do the. But it gets off me, it can extrapolate. I love using that word.
Yes.
From that, any kind of concoction they can imagine.
One last point. What about tapping?
It gets off me, it can extrapolate. I love using that word.
Yes.
From that, any kind of concoction they can imagine.
One last point. What about tapping harmonics? I've seen you do that a lot.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, what that is once you get your technique down to the point where you're really hitting strongly, almost anything you hit is going to come out as a harmonic. Anywhere along the string, too.
In that case, you're playing the over.
Is that what that is?
Tapping out the notes that would be the open harmonics?
Yeah, I guess that is. That's actually a scale, I guess. It's
right.
All along. So if you just hit the bass anywhere, there's a thing in a Eat 'em and Smile record, in Going Crazy. People always think, what in the world is that?
Yeah, what was that?
It's the simplest thing in the world. Just again, kind of a drum rudiment thing, only tapping harmonics. You get a little distortion and compression on your bass, it brings those harmonics come ringing, ripping out of there. Get them out like that. It works everywhere.
In addition to banging them out that way, you also do a pinch harmonic.
Yeah, that thing I just did there. Again, that's a Billy Gibbons idea. I stole that from him. He's great.
He's something, doesn't he? Still is.
Yeah, he sure is. I think he uses a peso or a quarter or something for a pick. And so when the pick goes past the string, the soft part of his thumb touches it, and he gets the harmonic. So since I use a pick, and the only thing I have hard in my hands, well, you can do a lot with that, but I won't anyway. The only thing I have in my hands that I can use like that is my fingernails. So I use that as the pick with my soft part of my thumb up against it. So actually, if you want to, I don't know if you can see there now, but just get kind of a. See that? So the advantage of that is you get a real power to that real. So live, you got Riemann distortion and everything. You just get those kill harmonics that just watch people drop in the crowd. Unbelievable.
Could you tell us, in your opinion, what should a good bass solo do?
Well, like any solo, it should be an element of the song. It should be an extension of the song. Also an expression of the individual's spot in the band, in the song. It should be connected. A lot of solos are kind of non sequitur these days. A lot of guys are just riffing mania without any real connection to the song. The guitarist I'm working with now, Paul Gilbert, is a good example of someone who can just scream on his instrument when it comes time to knowing a song and playing within the context of the song. so you have to really come up with something, so to speak. And so what I generally do is what I know about the modes and keys and things like that. I try and just get real familiar with a key and the moves of a song, kind of stay with it. And you don't necessarily have to go speed demon craze to have a good solo. Some of the most effective solos and bass lines, the most memorable ones, are not all that complicated or complex or wild. It's just they're basically element of the song. If you hear like a you know what song that is already. So many bands, like well, I won't give a million examples here, but just to give an idea what the song is, the bass should really carry it, and like Stump the Band, playing a bass line, you should be able to tell what the song is from the bass line. That's how much the song should contain the bass line. It should be, where nowadays you could never play Stump the Band with just the bass line. Right. What song is this? It could be one of 100,000 songs that are out there now, because that's what the bass line is in most of them, So they move around a little bit, and I think that's the element that you have to have in solos. And as I said before, all the fast, wild stuff that a lot of people focus in on certain players that do that stuff, and that's really cool, and it's fun as a riot to do. I love doing it. I'll do it for the rest of my life. But just understand that it's only a small percentage of playing. Major portion of your playing is right with that drummer, just wailing away with that guy, just moving. When he moves, you move. When he breathes, you breathe. When he blinks, you blink. Things.
Would the same hold true for an unaccompanied bass solo?
Well, for an unaccompanied bass solo, you're pretty much free. I mean, you're free to do whatever you feel like.
Do you look for structure, though? Do you look for
I kind of stick around in a certain area, move around, get an idea of things, build little things up. As I said, most of my stuff's come from playing live, and I've thought it up on the spot. Most of my solos, it was just like, solo time, go, and who knows what was going to come out. The downside of that is sometimes it'd be like, there's a little bit of too experimental tonight there, Bill, so, I don't know. And the upside of it, once in a while you would hit the nail right on the head, and it would be total magic. going out on a limb and seeing if you can make it happen. But unaccompanied solos are great. But, it depends on your audience and what kind of music you're doing. In a country and western band, I don't think you'd be doing too many unaccompanied bass solos, I don't think Whitney Houston's bass player would be doing unaccompanied bass, like that. But, in other kinds of music, that's the case. And if it's entertaining enough, it can be valid. But I think bottom line is entertainment on it, too, And musical technique is underneath communication. Communication is first, technique comes second. So if you're communicating, you're doing it, no matter what your technique is.